Time says 2 o'clock. Are we ready to go? So I'd like to call this meeting to order for the Corporation Township of Plessis on October 7th, 2020. And I will start with roll call. Councillor Bailey.
Present.
Sorry, Balmer, I meant. Sorry, I'm going to go in order. I'm going to start again. Councillor Balmer.
Present.
Councillor Goida.
Present.
Councillor Spoulos.
Present.
Councillor Bailey.
Present.
And I am here as well. Okay, we will start our moment of reflection. Okay, so now we have the confirmation of the agenda. Ms. Whitefox, you have a resolution to read?
That council approves the October 7th, 2020 council agenda as circulated.
Can I get a mover for that, please?
Sure.
Councillor Spoulos, seconder. Councillor Bailey, all right. Any questions or comments on that before we vote? No. All in favor? Councillor Balmer,
In favor.
Councillor Goida,
In favor.
Councillor Spoulos,
In favor.
Councillor Bailey,
In favor.
and I'm in favor, so that's carried. Yeah, do we have any disclosure of pecuniary interest today?
Yes, I do.
Okay, Councillor Goida,
I have a pecuniary interest in item 10.2, the aggregate resource property valuation and advocacy report. And I have a pecuniary interest regarding any comments or discussion as it relates to aggregate property valuation as a family member owns an aggregate company in the township.
is that from Wellington County? Under correspondence? Or where is that? Okay,
No, it's under,
I'll just write it down.
sorry, it's under correspondence. The second item under correspondence.
Okay, it's all in one? Just
10.2.
10.2 and, yeah, okay. Sorry, the way you spoke, I thought maybe there was 2 items, but it's just 10.2 all inclusive of 10.2.
Yes, correct.
Okay, perfect. All right, any other disclosures? None? All right, so the consent agenda. We get to Mrs. Whitefox read the resolution. Well, you know what, wait. We might as well get if there's any items we want removed. There's no point in reading the resolution if there's items they want removed. So Councillor Balmer, do you have any items you want removed for discussion?
No, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Goida.
Nope.
Okay, Councillor Spoulos.
Yes, 2 items, Mr. Mayor, 6.6 and 6.17, and also 6.14.
All right, I only had 6.14, so I'm comfortable with those. Did you catch those, Ms. Whitefox?
Yes, I have the first resolution prepared to accept the other items.
Okay, and Councillor Bailey, do you have anything you would like to move?
Nope. No.
Okay, Ms. Whitefox, you want to read the resolution excluding those items Councillor Spoulos mentioned, please?
Yes. That the consent agenda items with the exception of items 6.6, 6.14, and 6.17 listed for October 7th, 2020 council meeting be received for information.
All right, can I get a mover for that, please?
I'll move.
Well,
Councillor Balmer, and I'll take a seconder as Councillor Goida. And all in favor, Councillor Balmer,
Favor.
Councillor Goida,
in favor.
Councillor Spoulos,
In favor.
Councillor Bailey.
In favor.
I'm in favor. All right, so John, since I'm in agreement with you on the 6.14 and the other ones, I'll just let you have the floor and you can discuss them one at a time. So was it 6.6?
Okay, it's a question of staff. Is it possible to get an assessment whether we would pay more or less if we went the route Muskoka's proposing?
So I'll just give a quick background on the MPAC levy. So lower tier municipalities are not responsible for paying the MPAC levy. It's actually the County of Wellington. And under the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation Act, the funding requirements from MPAC are distributed to each municipality based on two different items. So total assessed values of the homes in the municipality and property counts in the homes in the municipality. And they compare these for that specific municipality to all of Ontario. So if council wanted to support Muskoka's resolution, it would mean that the MPAC levy would be billed directly to the township rather than the county. And since the calculation is based on averages and how that compares to the province, the township would likely do worse in the assessment aspect because our assessments are higher than other municipalities in the province. But we would likely do better on the number of properties, just based on the number of properties we have in comparison to other municipalities in the province. So that's just a brief overview of how the MPAC levy works and how that's calculated.
Okay,
So if I could
is
just
there
chime
a
in.
way of determining which way it would go if we went towards what Muskoka's proposing?
So I would need to know the household counts of every municipality. I quickly discussed with the County of Wellington, and just based on the municipalities that we have within the county, our assessments are significantly higher, but our property counts are lower. So it could likely be a wash, just based on those two aspects associated with the calculation.
Okay, if it's a wash, it's not worth pursuing. Thank you.
Okay.
No problem.
Any other council member want to make any discussions about 6.6? No, okay.
Just other than a bit of history on this, keeping in mind, of course, this is all part of the downloading, the creation of MPAC in the late 90s was to replace what used to be done by the province. It used to be a provincial job. There was the provincial assessment office was in Guelph, and it was paid for by the province. This is part of downloading the cost to the municipalities. When they created MPAC, the cost of running MPAC was then transferred to the municipalities as well.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Spillis, your next item.
Well, 6.14, which is the City of Guelph response to township Puslinch. I guess there's an item in there, I think it's page 39, where it says that the city is open to meeting with township staff if they so desire to get an understanding what's going on. And my question is it possible to have request City of Guelph staff to come into our council meeting and sort of give an overview of what their plans are? So at least we have it available for our residents to look at.
I'd like to chime in a little bit before staff answers. So this is a response to the letter that I penned with council's blessing. And one component why I wanted to pull it out is they didn't address, the request to extend the restriction on heavy truck traffic. I looked at the sign the other day. I thought it was 7 p.m., but it's 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. North of Clare Road. And I was hoping they would, at least discuss it to move that out to Maltby Road. So I had some discussions with the Ward 6 representative, and what was coming up more and more in the conversation was the desire. They're identifying that Gordon has a lot of traffic, and they kept looking at Victoria Road as a alternate to start pushing some traffic to, and I tried to reiterate that that's not acceptable. It's not a road that is meant for a lot more traffic. We're trying to actually mitigate some concerns over there, and I was feeling that wasn't being received as well as I had hoped. And I'm wondering, Councillor Spillis, if there's a delegation in order at all of Guelph Council to get the Guelph Council members aware of our concerns. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Would you rather start at the staff level and have staff talk to staff, or should we make a delegation, because this truck issue wasn't addressed? And just if you Google it, there's talk from different councillors about putting traffic to Victoria Road, and I think we need to educate them a little bit. So what are your thoughts?
My concern is going the political route should be a last recourse. In other words, let staff try to resolve at a staff level, and if that doesn't work, if it gets pushed up the ladder, so to speak. I'd like to hear what our CEO thinks about this.
Sure. Mr. Schwendinger?
Sure. I tend to agree with Councillor Serpoulis that we should try this at the staff level. One thing that might be beneficial, and then if it doesn't work out, then go to the council route and request a delegation. But as opposed to directly going as a delegation to council or getting the councils involved and using up all of council time, maybe what we could do is send a letter as staff outlining what concerns were not addressed, send it to their staff, but then also maybe just CC council for their information. That way they're at least they're at least aware that the discussions are ongoing, and that they can follow up from their own internal process as well, just so that they're in the loop. But then that might help to get a resolution or at least some more information through the staff level. And if that doesn't pan out the way council's hoping, then we could request a delegation following that. But at least that way, staff has the opportunity to work on it and council has a heads up on it.
Okay.
Good. Okay.
So I'm good with that approach, Mr. Mayor, if the rest of council is as well.
Sure, I'll give him a chance right now. So Councillor Goyda?
Yeah, I was disappointed that their letter didn't address the truck prohibition on Gordon between Clare and Maltby. It kind of seemed like in their letter that they were saying that the Clare Maltby transportation plan had been completed, and kind of gave the vibe that the door's been kind of closed on that already. So that was a little concerning. But in any case, I think, their letter does indicate that staff are available to meet. And they've also talked about this engagement window for the transportation master plan. So I think it would be good to formalize some kind of meeting between staff, at least to start. And hopefully that could be prior to them doing their work on their master transportation plan. And then failing all else, then yeah, I would agree maybe a delegation is in order, but I don't think it's gotten to that point yet, because they have indicated in this letter that they're willing to discuss it further.
Mr. Bailey?
Muted here. No, I like how the discussion's gone here in terms of, connecting with staff to staff, and I like the idea of just being CC'd on what's happening. This might be a little more detailed question, but they talk about the projected traffic volumes in the letter, and I'm just curious as to whether the traffic volume projected numbers for the county or for us jive with what they're suggesting, like making sure we're on par with the projected numbers. We know that.
Sorry, can anybody else chime in? Glenn?
I do not know, but that is definitely something that we could confirm, just to make sure that it does jive with what the county has projected.
Mm-hmm. It seems like high numbers.
And I believe the county is doing their own traffic master plan, which will help, forecast traffic patterns in the future. So it's good to get ahead of this before trying to be reactionary. So this is, Councillor Balmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I share the concern about the vagueness regarding Gordon Street, and I'm concerned about what I heard about Victoria Road, especially considering the condition that Maltby Road is in. It's not gonna help people get to the Hanlon and directing people to come east and expect them to go west to get back to the Hanlon. I don't think that's gonna work. But this always reminds me, I'm gonna get nostalgic for a moment, but there used to be a thing called the Guelph and Suburban Roads Committee to deal with exactly these issues. Because Guelph as an island municipality needs these connections, and that venue made it possible to have there was a table where these things could be thought of in a wholesome manner. understanding that we need them just as much as they need us. So it gave us a table to solve these at, especially things like Brock Road. Anyway, I think Councillor Spoulis is on the right track here. That doesn't prevent any of us from reaching out to any of our other contacts on council, and making sure they're aware that we're talking about it and making sure they're aware that our staff are talking about it.
Okay, perfect. And just for clarification, the reason why I mentioned the delegation is I get concerned when we put more work on our staff. I just see an opportunity to try to lessen that workload, but it's not the right order to do things. That I'm fine with that as well. Okay, so Ms. White Fox, do you have a resolution?
Mr. Mayor, I just wonder if the fact that I requested that they come to our council to give an overview as well prior to starting the study, is wondering if we can include that in that letter that our CEO is planning to pen staff to staff.
I'd be comfortable with that. Can you add that to the resolution, Ms. White Fox?
Yes, I'm adding it just now.
It's kind of interesting though, Councillor Bulmer, now that, or Spoulis, now I'm thinking about it. We just discussed us not going to their council as delegation, but now we're going to ask them to come us as a delegation.
This would be a staff delegation, Mr. Mayor. Same way as we had the multi-secondary plan, the staff came to us for input type of thing.
Now, do you want that to happen prior to our staff trying to facilitate a meeting, or leave it up to the CEO?
I'd leave it up to staff discretions. When would be the opportune time?
Okay, I'm comfortable with that. Ms. White Fox, when you're ready, you can read them.
All right, I have a resolution first to accept item 6.6. So that consent agenda item 6.6 Township of Muskoka Resolution Letter Re Municipal Property Assessment Corporation Act 1997 be received for information.
Okay, can I get a mover for that, please? Councillor Bailey, seconder Councillor Spoulis, all in favor. Councillor Bulmer,
In favor.
Councillor Goida,
In favor.
Councillor Spoulis,
In favor?
Councillor Bailey.
In favor.
I'm in favor. We're going to read the resolution for 614, and then we're going to go to our delegations. Okay, Ms. White Fox.
That the consent agenda item 6.14 City of Guelph response to Township of Puslinch September 29th, 2020 letter be received for information, and that staff follow up with the City of Guelph and request a meeting in regards to this matter and report back. And further, that staff requests the City of Guelph to attend Puslinch Council meeting to give an overview of this project.
Okay. I don't know if that's say City of Guelph staff, but we all understand what it means. Can I get a mover for that, please? Councillor Spoulis, seconder.
Sure.
Councillor Goida, all in favor. Councillor Bulmer,
Favor.
Councillor Goida,
In favor.
Councillor Spoulis,
In favor?
Councillor Bailey,
In favor.
and I'm in favor. That's carried. Okay, so now we're going to go to our first delegation. I apologize for the
We
delegations.
still had one more
Oh.
consent item, I believe, 17.
Well, I was just trying to get to the delegations because they were supposed to be at 2:05, Mr. CEO. I mean, I'm comfortable with carrying on to finish them or just
Okay.
bring them in. So that's the
Okay,
way-
that's fine.
Just because they're waiting, I'll just don't let me forget about 6.17.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll ask that Ms. White Fox brings in Mr. Mitchell. Hello, Kevin. Nice to see you again.
Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me okay?
I can.
Thank you.
Okay, well, whenever you want to start, do you have something you want to speak to us about? I see in your delegation there's an ask, but I don't know if you want to speak to it first.
Sure, thank you. Just as a quick update, thank you again for having us and providing update number 2 from the hall from our pit number 1 and pit number 2 on Victoria Road over to our pit number 1 on Brock Road. The construction project has now moved on to the point where on late in the afternoon of September the 25th, the roundabout was opened up. Now, it hasn't been fully open every day, but we've been able to more or less use it with more frequency than before and with much more ease. There's a couple of things where we couldn't use the larger trucks and one day when we couldn't ship, but it seems to be back to pretty much well normal now. So just so the rest of council is aware, I'm not sure if the mayor shared it with you, but On 2 occasions, the mayor reached out to me and indicated that one of our truck drivers was not behaving, I'll use the words appropriately, on the road. And we followed up and made sure that all of our drivers are aware of how they should be acting, whether they're using the temporary haul road or they're using the permanent haul road. And we'll continue to do that. So where we're at right now is we are back on the original haul road. And at the end of November, we would be scheduled to stop that. We haven't asked today that we would be able to extend that. We're having a difficult time through that construction project, so we limited the amount of trucks, and then the trucks were getting frustrated, and at times it was difficult for us to get trucks, and so we'd like to get back before the year end. And so the request today would be to extend our agreement with you to allow us to ship from December the 1st until December the 18th, extending it beyond that end of year to that end of year timeframe, and that would allow us to get our inventory level back to where it was. We ate into that inventory during this temporary truck haul road matter. The other thing that we'd like to talk about, it would be to extend the hours, to have them commence at 7 a.m. When our trucks are operating, because they can't start until 8, it's difficult to get trucks. If they're working in other projects, they can go there and start earlier than that, quite often at 6 or sometimes even earlier if they're working for other companies. But if we could do that for the rest of the year, that would be greatly appreciated. So we have the 2 asks, 1 to start at 7 and 2 for the rest of this year. So that would be on a go forward basis from today on, and then in December from the 1st until the 18th to allow us to haul to finish up this year.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. I just would like a little bit of clarification. When you ask for hauling to commence at 7 a.m., does that mean that your Dufferin Aggregates employee drives to Pit 2, unlocks the gate at 6:55, and the first truck rolls in and then gets loaded and leaves? Or are they arriving at, 6:30, 6:15, getting loaded, and the first loaded truck leaves at 7 a.m.? So, and vice versa, if you're 8 a.m. start, is the first loaded truck leaving at 8, or is the empty truck arriving at 8?
So for clarification, it's probably what you explained, that they do arrive a little bit earlier and they get loaded, so the first truck does not leave the site. Now, we work very carefully with the truck drivers to make sure they're not sitting and queuing on the side of the road. And that's the number 1 thing for us. And then the second thing would to make sure that when they do come in, ideally, it's as close to that hour when we're opening, and that's when they would arrive. So under the premise that if 7 a.m. was the starting time, we would make sure that they don't show up before 7 o'clock in the morning, that the first load would come in and the empty truck would come in at 7, and that they would get loaded, and the first truck leaving is going to be closer to 7:05 or 7:10, whatever that time frame would be. The intent here is not to, I'll use the word creep, to allow it to having trucks coming in very, very early and then leaving at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, and that was my concern when we first extended your hours of operation. I did notice a couple trucks parked there. I called you and I did not see it again, I really appreciate that. So if this is just really formalizing what's kind of already happening, if you have an 8 a.m. start and trucks are coming in a little early and the first loaded truck is leaving at 8 a.m., then I would be comfortable for the remainder of the year going to the 7 a.m. as long as the creep doesn't happen, as long as the trucks aren't rolling in at 5 after 6, sitting on the road, disturbing the houses. So I'll open it up to council, see what their question lines are. Councillor Ballmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome back, Mr. Mitchell. Always lovely to hear your voice again. Yeah, thank you for the clarification there, Mr. Chair. The other one I wanted to just clarify your talk when you said 7 o'clock start from today on. You're just talking for this year, not for next year as well.
Yes, we would like to use it as a trial and make sure it works, and make sure that the township's, finds that it's working and that our company is doing as we said we would do. And then the intent would be, if that's fine and it's acceptable to council today, that we would come back next spring and have the same conversation again for next year if things went well.
Perfect. Yeah, then and congratulations on getting. I guess you had nothing to do with the construction, but I'm happy for you. The construction got tidied up a little earlier than we all expected. That's good. But otherwise, I don't have any issues with either of these requests with the, subject to the clarifications we received. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Counselor, oh, she's out. Counselor Sapoulis, are you in on this one, Counselor Goida?
Yeah, I'm in on this one.
Okay, sorry, I saw your video off, so I thought maybe you were.
No, sorry. Yeah, I don't really have any concerns with this. I think if I remember correctly, there have been previous years where that time has been extended into December. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Last year, we in fact came to you and asked for the same type of an extension.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I have no problem with that going on an extra. I guess it would be 3 weeks. I know that it has been kind of a bit of a difficult time for the past several weeks. So I think if that would help to make you sort of whole again, I have no problem with that.
Counselor Sapoulis? Oh, you're muted, Counselor.
Mr. Mitchell, what is your backlog like right now?
Well, we normally have, somewhere between 5,000 and 8,000 tons of material sitting in a pile. And if depending on the other stockpiles and that in the property, we can grow that a little bit more than that. And that allows us to do production a little bit further out. We've eaten into that pile where our inventory of bank materials is now more or less gone. And we'd like to build that back up. But as the season has progressed, we've been fairly busy. And as a result of that, we'd like to be able to keep processing. And so we're not able to process the material that's not there that we've eaten into, and also to meet the needs of the customers over the winter. So it's been even though it's been a COVID year, the construction industry has been fairly steady. And so we'd like to make sure that we can get through the winter months with the product that we'd have on the ground, as our washing operations doesn't go on. It may, in fact, if we got a cold freeze up, we wouldn't haul on the 18th of December. We would fill the pile up, but we would be washing until A, we run out of material, or B, it gets too cold to wash.
Yeah, and second thing, the dialogue between you and the mayor, I'm still a little bit hazy on the 7 o'clock versus 8 o'clock. What I was led to believe is your trucks would roll in at 7 o'clock, but they wouldn't be coming out at 8 o'clock. We give you this hauling to start at 7. Is that the way I understood it?
No, and my apologies for not being clear on that. So we would unlock the gate at 7 o'clock. The first truck could then enter the gate, and we would avoid any queuing on the road. And then they would proceed to get loaded. So the first truck could leave loaded at say 7:05 or 7:10. We would not be opening up the gate at 6:30, getting all the trucks in at 6:30 and loading them and having them sit there and waiting till 7 o'clock. So it would avoid that creeping the time to earlier and earlier. So the trucks are coming in earlier and getting waiting.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, is that how you understood as well?
Yeah, I just, to be truthful, I felt that if at the 8 o'clock start, there might have been a little bit of cheating going on. So this is more formalizing it in a commitment from Dufferin to say they're going to open the gate at 5 to 7, and the first load of truck will leave shortly after 7. I just didn't want to see trucks coming in before 7, waking up residents and things like that. So I'm comfortable with the commitment from Mr. Mitchell that it'll be a 7 a.m. start, and then loaded trucks, whatever amount of time it takes them to load to head out.
Okay, that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Bailey.
Yeah, I'm okay with the 7 o'clock start. I'm going to turn my video off. I just had a clarification question. I guess from what I heard, the alternate route of doing a loop through Morriston is now not needed. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, that's great. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, do we have a resolution for Mr. Mitchell's recommendations?
That the delegation by Kevin Mitchell, Director of Property Planning and Approvals, CRH Canada Group, Inc., with respect to Aberfoyle Pit 2 Township of Puslinch Agreement be received, and that Section 3 of the agreement, being hours of operation for hauling, be temporarily amended to commence at 7 a.m. Monday to Friday, and that the current agreement be extended from November 30th to December 18th, 2020.
Okay, can I get a mover for that, please? Nobody wants to move it?
I'll move it.
Get shred of luck, Kevin. Counselor Bulmer moves, seconder. Counselor Spoulos, I saw you raise your hand. All in favor, Counselor Bulmer,
In favor.
Counselor Goida. You guys are moving on my screen. You're muted.
In favor.
Okay, Counselor Spoulos
In favor.
and Counselor Bailey.
Yeah, in favor.
I'm in favor as well. That's carried. All right. Now, council, we have a delegation which is pertinent to a planning issue. Are we comfortable with listening to the delegation and then dealing with the planning issue? Just do them back to back? Or would we rather wait and do it linear? Just looking for some direction. I will, hearing none, I'm going to say we're going to do the delegation now, and then we'll deal with the planning issue because I'm sure the person delegating is not working for free. So we will try to get that resolved as quickly as possible. You can bring it in, Ms. Whitebox. Hello, Mr. DeRuiter. Oh, there he is. Muted.
Good
How are you
afternoon,
today?
Mr. Mayor. Good. Sorry for the delay in joining that. I seem to have a bit of a lag, so I apologize for that.
No need to apologize.
My name's Neil DeRuyter. I'm a planner with MHBC Planning. I'm here today to speak to you about the Gallo zoning bylaw amendment that's before you today. First, I want to thank you for allowing us the opportunity to address you today, and certainly I want to thank township and county staff for getting us to this point. There's been a lot of meaningful discussion to get us here, so we're very thankful for the efforts on behalf of staff and for finding time to put this on council's agenda today. So we're very appreciative of that. I'll try to keep this as simple as possible. I think to start, we are supportive of staff's recommendation, recommending approval of the zoning bylaw amendment. Just for council's information, this application is to legalize an existing use. That's Mr. Gallo's business on concession 7. And it's to legalize the use from the perspective of the zoning bylaw. There are no changes proposed in terms of intensifying, adding new structures, or changing what happens. What's there right now will continue to occur. And so with that preface, there are really two matters I think we want to bring to council's attention that our client has a concern with, and it's regarding two matters in the site-specific bylaw. And I want to start by saying too, the other thing that council should be aware of is there have been no letters in opposition to this application. In fact, 5 of his neighbors have provided the township with letters of support for his proposal and what he's doing there. And as well, we don't have any agency concerns. So I preface that with what we're going to now talk about. And the first is county staff are recommending that there be a 5-meter setback for outdoor storage. My client doesn't have an issue with that, but he does have an issue as it relates to an interior lot line next to a property that's also family owned. And that 5 meters, I know it may sound like a small amount, but there's a lot of material and equipment that would then have to be moved about 10 feet over. And as I noted, part of this application is nothing's changing. So what's there is currently there. The neighbor right next to him at that point has provided a letter of support. They know what's happening at the site. They're comfortable with what's there. So if that 5-meter goes through, Mr. Gallo will then have to move a substantial amount of equipment about 10 feet over. And we're really not really sure what that would accomplish. The second thing, and this is a bit more of a technical matter, county staff are recommending that site plan control be applied to the site. So once we would go through, assuming council approves the zoning bylaw amendment, we would then apply to the township for site plan approval. And so that the idea being that the existing use, what's there, would be regulated through site plan. There are a couple concerns. The first is we've gone through quite a process to get to this point. Having to add site plan on top of that adds additional cost and time. We're not sure what it accomplishes. I'm sure you can see from what my client's gone through recently and getting to the point where we've got the Conservation Authority signed off. There's no further agency concerns, and you can see the site-specific bylaw has a lot of detail to it. We're just not sure what adding another cost and process on top of that really satisfies. And I guess from my planning perspective, I know one of the discussions has been that site plan is deemed to be helpful to address land use compatibility. And what I would respond with is that land use compatibility is experienced there right now, today. If there were issues, the township would have heard about it. There are not. The neighboring landowners have provided letters of support for what's there. So we really question the idea of having to go through a site plan process. I know in discussion with township staff, there are discussions about potentially streamlining or simplifying the process in this case. But at this point, it's still an extensive process with an application fee upwards of $10,000. So we're not really sure what that would accomplish in having Mr. Gallo go through a duplicative process when he's not adding or changing anything. So with that, I'll close my comments and just say, yeah, we support staff's recommendation, but we would ask if council can consider those two items, one being an exception of the 5-meter setback, and the second one, that site plan not be applied retroactively to what's there right now. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that council may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. I'm looking at a satellite image of the property, and the 5-meter setback is only a concern for a boundary that abuts a family member's property. Is that the southern? Which boundary is that?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. And I apologize. I probably should have included an air photo with it, but there is an air photo in the county staff report. It's the lot line along the southern boundary. So you can see there's a line of equipment that stretches in an east-west direction. So we don't have any problems with the setback applying to any of the other property boundaries. It's just the one along the southern boundary, and you can see there's an east-west delineation of equipment that's stored, and there's a Jersey barrier right now that separates the properties. That's really the setback that we're having an issue with.
Okay. And you said that there's 5 letters of support. How did we get here? Because I know throughout the township, there's plenty of other businesses that operate in the agricultural zone. Why is Mr. Gallo going through the whole process of getting a site-specific zoning? Was it complaint-based, or maybe staff can answer that?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll just answer the portion that I'm aware of since we were retained by Mr. Gallo, but my understanding was that it was due to an order issued by the township that the use did not comply with the agricultural zone at that time.
Okay. All right, I'll open it up for council for now. Councilor Ballmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for those comments. I fully support the rezoning application to bring the site into compliance. He's been doing business there a long time and hasn't bothered the neighbors. Other than when the asphalt plant was there, that was a little bit, that creates some issues for the neighbors. But in this case, this doesn't seem to be creating any problems. To your specific request, though, I always have to remind myself, we're not zoning Mr. Gallo. The zoning isn't attached to who owns this property or who owns the adjacent property. The zoning applies to the land regardless of who owns the two properties. So the 5-meter setback is to ensure, in my mind, that when a family member doesn't own the neighboring property, or when Mr. Gallo isn't operating this business, it still fits in that site. So I, just off the top of my head, I don't initially support. I don't support all the removal of that unless there was some other alternative process put in place to meet the objective of that setback. I do agree with what you're saying about not requiring site plan control for things that are already there, but I fully support the county's perspective that we do need site plan control for the things that aren't there right now. Some of those include screening and the natural environment piece. So I think there are items that aren't there right now that are mentioned in the zoning bylaw that I think site plan control would be the most appropriate tool to make sure that they are there. So those would be my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Goyda.
Thank you, and thank you for coming and presenting to us today. It's not often that an application comes forward with a lot of letters of support. So it was good to see that there was 5 neighbors that supported this application. In terms of the request made, I tend to agree with Councillor Balmer in terms of that 5-meter setback, that the zoning, that 5-meter setback isn't just for right now, it's for, that land for future use as well. And so, as Councillor Balmer said, it may not be Mr. Gallo that always owns that abutting property. And so I think, that 5-meter setback is probably is appropriate. In terms of the site plan control, I fully get it, and I understand that it's very frustrating. I have personally been in that same exact position. It's frustrating when you've already, had this land use, you've already been using the land and operating without any issue. But I do have to say that as the municipality, we need to be fair and make sure that we're applying consistent standards and guidelines to all development. And, just because this has been in use without any issues, that's not, necessarily fair to the next person who wants to apply and has to go through site plan approval. So I would be in favor of if there was any method of streamlining that process, but I think I would have to support the county in this sense of doing the site plan control.
Councillor Spoulos?
Yes, and to be brief, I support what Councillors Bulmer and Gord have stated. It's not, I don't want to restate everything again, but I agree with what they said.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Bailey?
Yeah, I'm getting caught up on the whole process, and I like, Mr. Mayor, how you drew attention to how we even started this and how we got here. But it looks like we're just trying to legalize everything and get the T's crossed, get the I's dotted. And so I have to agree with other councillors and with the county, and that we just need to be making we need to make consistent standards across the lands in the township. And so therefore I do think we need to go through with the site plan control as well.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Neil. I'm going to make sure we deal with the planning report immediately following your delegation, which is now. And I encourage you to stick around. I have a couple of questions that I don't feel are appropriate for yourself. They're for staff. And I hope they're a creative solution, but we'll see where the conversation goes. So I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And if I'm not able to, please let me know. But there is a point just I would want to make in response to a couple of the comments. Would that be okay with you, Mr. Mayor?
I'm fine with that.
So, and I'll be very brief. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in response to just the comment about this applying to the land use not tied to Mr. Gallo's operation, I would note that the specific zoning bylaw in front of you only applies to a mat storage business. So there are not many of them out there. So in other words, if Mr. Gallo were to sell his property, it doesn't mean somebody could pick that up and then apply those regulations. So that's why this bylaw is very geared to what Mr. Gallo does. So that would be the only comment I have in response to this sort of running with the property versus the operation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're very welcome. Thank you for your presentation. Ms. Hoyflonks, do we have a resolution for delegations, please?
Yes, that the delegation by Neil DeRuyter, MHBC Planning, with respect to Planning Report D14/GAL zoning bylaw amendment be received for information.
Thank you. And can I get a mover for that, please? Councillor Sewell, seconder. Councillor Balmer, you haven't been Haven't seen you. Seconded, Counselor Ballmer.
Okay,
Are you in favor?
yes,
Counselor Goya,
In favor.
Counselor Spoulos,
In favor?
and Counselor Bailey.
Yeah, in favor.
And I'm in favor, so that's carried. And we will move on to the planning. Just had it with Megan. Under reports, Wellington County, Wellington Planning Recommendation Report, Gallo.
Hello, members of council and Mr. Mayor. I'm present here. There was a little bit of a delay, so if you've said anything between that moment, I didn't hear it.
You did not say anything. Nice to see you again, Ms. Ferris. Maybe one day we'll see you in person. And you may have the floor when you're ready.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm not certain if you want me to do a little bit of a highlight of the application, because I think Neil has kind of summarized it for the most part. Ultimately, what I was trying to do here, so the township has an application where someone has established a use without permissions, essentially, and this use has grown over the last 20 plus years. And then, you know, through this growth on site, you know, a natural feature on the property was inadvertently negatively affected. So the intent of this application is to ultimately legalize the use, address an order on the property. And a positive thing related to this application is that it has resulted in additional protections being applied to a natural feature on the property. And that the natural feature has been restored to previous state as there was some slight encroachments beforehand. So there's some positive aspects related to the application. Now, in terms of the zoning provisions that I've tried to apply here, so really what I was trying to go for was the request is for where is as is for a use that, you know, has never been through any type of planning review process that this type of use would typically be required to go through. And my intent was to allow the use to continue, but at the same time to scale it back so that it was consistent with the intent of the county's official plan for allowing small scale industrial uses, commercial institutional type uses, and also ensuring that the land use would be compatible. Different ways one can address land use compatibility is through you know, limiting types of uses, applying setbacks, and requiring you know, landscaping, buffering, including site plan control. So that's ultimately what I've tried to achieve with this zoning provision. The intent is that certain sections of the township's zoning bylaw would be applied, and I've given some minor relief from those provisions to give some flexibility to the use, which, you know, if those flexibilities weren't being given, so the zoning provisions for the outdoor storage uses and areas is actually quite restrictive. It actually restricts storage areas to a certain percentage of the principal building size, and there's other restrictions that are applied there. So just trying to find that middle ground where, you know, you're allowing the use, but within reason, and then factoring in that, yes, there has been many letters of support that have been provided for this application, in support of this application, but when looking at it from a land use perspective, you're looking at uses. How does an industrial use function? And how is it appropriate next to sensitive land uses? Owners will change over time, and I don't know that we know that if any previous owners have had issues with this property. I don't know how long all of the owners that have written letters of support have been within the area. Maybe they've been there for 20 years as well, but maybe not. So really, when you're looking at these things, it's not about who owns the lands now. It's about this type of use next to sensitive land uses. So with regards to, just speaking to Neil's comments, with regards to site plan control, and I am echoing what various councillors have already mentioned already, but it really is important for the township, in my opinion, to apply a consistent approach. If site plan control if this development was exempt from site plan control, that's essentially, as I say it, and speaking very bluntly, that's like saying someone can go through a permitting process, seek permits to allow a use that's not necessarily meeting the certain building code requirements for that specific use. And then ultimately circumvent the site plan approval process. That's if site plan control was not applied, that's ultimately what it would mean. I understand that they're not building anything new on site, but that is a certain local tool and mechanism that every development of this nature would be obligated to go through. Now, in terms of what can be achieved through site plan control, ultimately, all of these zone provisions can be demonstrated as well. And that would include some of the key components being how landscaping and buffering will be demonstrated on site, particularly along the interior left lot line that abuts that vacant lot, which is the southerly lot line. And then speaking to the 5 meter setback, just to kind of give a bit of explanation, and I understand I'm kind of a little long-winded right now, but I'm almost to my final point in explanation in response to Neil's comments. So the 5 meter setback was something that I have ultimately determined when looking at various other setbacks that potentially could be applied to the property. There's various numbers that range from potentially a 2 meter setback from a lot line to potentially a 15 meter. So in the industrial zone, if that vacant lot had like a specific residential zone on that property, technically any industrial use would be required to maintain a 15 meter setback from that interior lot line. So I've looked at all of these different potential setbacks that could be applied, and I've come up with kind of that middle ground number to help provide some buffering of these uses. Right now, so I was on the site many months ago before COVID really sunk its teeth into us. Pretty much there's a lot of storage that is almost directly along that lot line there. So there's various items that are almost delineating that interior lot line. So my hope is to push that out, establish a setback from those particular for storage and shipping containers, and then hopefully then through the site plan control process, get some vegetative buffering and fencing in between there to divide those two particular uses. So that's my long-winded response, but I'm here to answer any questions from council as well.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you for your hard work on this file. And one thing I do want to point out that this is a rehabilitated gravel pit. And in full disclosure, when I sit in front of MNRF staff and municipal affairs and housing, I tell them that Puslinch is open for business to take the aggregate rate down, take it flat, and then make employment lands. And this is an example of that, because that could have been a large hole in the ground that was just a lake. And here we have now a zoning for industrial use, and I don't know the tax laws or policies in the township if he's going to be paying more or not, but I'd rather see something like this than a giant swimming pool. So my first question is surrounding the 5 meter setback. And since the southern boundary is, with a relative, is there possibility to implement the 5 meter setback, but then have the neighboring landowner provide annually a letter to the municipality stating that they're not seeking enforcement of that 5 meter setback? So that's what I'm trying to accomplish, is his son, wife, neighbor, whoever the relative is okay with the equipment being where it is now. And as long as we receive an annual letter, then we would not enforce that 5 meter setback. Is that a possibility, or is that completely illegal?
To you, Mr. Mayor, that's a very atypical approach to this specific scenario that I don't know that the township has implemented. I wouldn't necessarily take that route because once you've put something into this site-specific bylaw, and if it's approved by township council, they're obligated to then meet that setback. In order for it to not be applied, it either needs to be reduced or removed. The other thing I would focus on is that I understand that the neighbors, and in particular the neighbor, that a family member that owns the vacant lot, doesn't object to the use, but that's family relations can easily change. it is a vacant lot, so who knows if that family member will actually build on that property, or if they will sell it off and a new owner is introduced to the area. So I have reservations about planning, I guess, planning for specific relationships versus planning for land uses, which is industrial next to a residential lot. So I have concerns about taking that approach. I would say if you wanted to go down a vein of that route, then I think you should be looking at whether or not then you want that setback to be maintained in the bylaw, I suppose.
Mr. C, oh, there you go. Mr. CAO, you comment?
Yeah, I would just along the lines of what Megan was just explaining is if you're going to accept it in this case, then you're going to be asked to do the same thing on other cases just because it's not a family member. What if a setback requirement is required on another property somewhere else? Oh, if I just get a letter from my neighbor, I don't have to meet that. I think you're opening the door to a lot of extra work, a lot of extra complications and problems with that approach.
Well, Mr. CAO, though, we just did it for a seasonal trailer park. You know, they're not going to meet the zoning, and we provided a letter. Is there, to me, that's a similar comparison. So that's not, I know it's a COVID situation, but I mean, that's the way I view this is, you know, as long as we receive an annual letter from whoever the landowner is that we're not going to enforce, because most of our enforcement is complaint based. So if you're sending a letter that you're supportive of the encroachment, then I feel that we wouldn't necessarily have a problem with not enforcing that 5-meter setback. As soon as you don't receive the letter, January 1st, choose a date, then bylaw attends, and it's still on the property. So my other question is, instead of forcing the site plan control, can you register it on title, or that on transfer of title, that site plan must be completed? Is that even a possibility? So that if Mr. Gallo were ever to sell the property, then the property would have to go through the site plan control process?
I'm just thinking about that, Mr. Mayor. I think that's more of a legal question that I don't think I could answer in terms of what the mechanism would be to do that, and if it's appropriate to do so. I think one thing I would state is that currently the township's site plan control bylaw applies to every single property in the township, and there's only certain, I think, scenarios where an exemption can be granted by township staff. So I don't know if that's a viable option. I think it's kind of a little bit outside of my expertise in terms of that, if that could legally be done and if it would be appropriate.
Okay, I'll open it up to council. Councilor Bomer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, staff, for your good answers there. I think we're traveling down the road of people zoning almost here, and land use planning is about land use planning, not land ownership planning. That's a different department, I believe. I have only one. Thank you for your report there, Ms. Ferris. I only have one question about the proposed zoning bylaw, and that has to do with the wording around screening. It says that there's a line in there about screening the satisfaction of the township. Are we proposing a different screening criteria here to the satisfaction of the township, or the ones that are already in our bylaw? If we're going to do so, I want to make sure it's clear enough that the owner can comply. I don't want to put something in front of them that they don't have any likelihood of, you know, I don't want to leave it airy-fairy that they don't know what they need to do. So maybe you can clarify what's meant by that line.
Sure, Councillor Bumber. Through you, the chair. So I have included some wording in there about it being, outdoor storage and shipping containers being generally screened and buffered from public. And I think the difference in wording is public view to the satisfaction of the township. If that is maintained or it's not maintained, there is a provision in the outdoor storage uses and areas section of the bylaw that will still apply to this site. And that section speaks to the use being screened, and then it gives examples of how it can be screened. So opaque fencing, masonry wall, landscaping, or berms, and then it says to the satisfaction of the township. So I think the only difference between the wording that I have there and zoning provision that would continue to apply to that site is, I've used the term public view. So, you know, I could tweak that a little bit. I could remove it because ultimately the zoning provision still prevails if this bylaw is approved. So, you know, it gives the existing zoning provision gives clarity as to what the screening can be, as opposed to what I have written is a little bit, well, it gives no description, it doesn't say fencing or anything. It's just, I think the only difference in the wording is that I made reference to public view.
Okay, that's helpful. I just, because if we're going to ask for something, I always like to make sure we're clear. I don't want, because staff can change. It's just like the ownership of the land can change. I want to make sure they know what they need to do to achieve that to the satisfaction of the township. And I also want to make sure that if we have something in the bylaw, and I see it there, it suggests we're asking for something different in the site specific than what would be typically asked. So is it possible to reference, either take that out to avoid that confusion that we're asking for something different, or just make sure it references the screening provisions of the bylaw so we know it's just we're asking for the standard screening provisions?
Through Mr. Chair, yes, I can make those adjustments. So when I bring the final bylaws back to council, you'll see a tweak with that.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Councilor Goyda?
Yeah, I have a question in terms of the site plan control or site plan approval. And I think this question is probably for Megan. What would typically be required for that? Like I'm imagining like some kind of a drainage plan, some kind of a landscaping plan, parking, like what kinds of things would be involved in that? And is there any of those items, especially considering that, you know, that there's no existing neighbors anyway, opposed to certain types of, you know, screenings or whatever? Is there a way that we can make it less costly for the applicant to have to hire consultants to provide all these various plans for the site plan control?
Through the chair, to answer Councilor Goyda's question. So typically with a site plan application, it can be quite extensive, but I think it depends on the type of development, the level of development, and the types of changes that are being proposed. This is a very, I would say, unique situation because everything exists. But typically you would see a site plan outlining where everything is existing in terms of, or proposed in terms of structures, setbacks, your parking locations, dimensions, access points, and how vehicles come in and can maneuver on site. You do have grading and drainage plans. You would have architectural elevation plans. In some cases, depending on the type of site, you would have a landscaping plan completed by a registered landscape architect. However, it's hard for me to speak for the township in terms of what exactly the site plan could look like, but I guess I have my own personal views of what it could look like. I could see it being going down a little bit more of a minor, I'll use air quotes, you can't see it, but more of a minor site plan review process where it's more along the lines of, from my perspective, I want to make sure that, you know, everything that is there is documented. It's just generally shown that it can be functional and that they can demonstrate that they meet their zoning provisions. Now, whether or not through that review process, if comments would be received about requiring, I guess, more technical items relating to grading and drainage, like those comments would come from the township's engineers as to whether or not they would be required for this specific scenario. It's hard to answer because it is so unique, but I guess I have a vision in my mind that it's not as intensive as your typical application process. And then when it comes to landscaping, I wasn't imagining obligating the applicant to go out and hire like a landscape architect and design this very elaborate, thoughtful plan. Technically, you can have an engineer prepare, as part of the site plan application, you would have an engineer prepare the plans, and they could indicate you know, the types of species of trees or planting that could be located on site and the quantity of them, and where fencing could be, and it could be something that simple. but I guess it ranges, but that's, in my mind, it's a more of a simple application process at the end of the day, from my perspective.
Okay, thank you. So perhaps I could ask Mr. CAO, is there a way through our own staff that we can assist in making this site plan less technical? Like, is there a way that we can kind of simplify it?
What we would do is we never try and make these things overly complicated and have more involved in them than is applicable. What we would rely on is the professional judgment of our planners, and we would obviously try and make it as simple and straightforward as possible. I can't say that we would set up something that would be exempt from the standard process people have to go through, whether this was a new application. But we'll keep it as simple and straightforward as we possibly can, while still being consistent with other requirements.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Councillor Spoulos?
Yes, question of Megan. With respect to the 5 meter setback, you mentioned that you had the option of going anywhere from 2 meters to 15 meters, and you selected 5 meters as the optimum. Is there an equivalency we can suggest that 2 meters with a fence and landscaping would be equivalent to 5 meters with nothing at all?
Just before we go down that road, Councillor Spoulos, I believe the concern for the setback was only on the southern boundary.
That's all I'm referring to, the southern boundary.
Because he'd have to, if he has to do 2 meter or 5 meter, he still has to move everything. So that's his.
No,
that's
that's not my understanding, Mr. Mayor. He had to move everything by 10 feet, which is 3 meters. So if we have a 2 meter setback, you don't have to move anything.
That's a good catch. I'll let Megan answer that first.
Through the chair, to answer Councillor Sapoulos's question. Well, ultimately it'd be up to Township Council, but I can say that there are provisions, and maybe I'll just go through some of the provisions that the outdoor storage uses in areas section has established already in the bylaw. So it does state that, you know, these out storage areas can be located about 2 meters from any lot line. So, you know, that could be one item that could be considered, but there's other provisions in here that also say that, you know, if outdoor storage area isn't permitted within any yard requirement of a residential zone. So a yard requirement would be for the interior lot lines, a minimum of 5 meters. And then me coming back to, you know, if this was a residential zone, it could also be as high as 15 meters. So for me, it was finding a middle point where it's the bylaw has some lesser, I guess, setbacks if someone was establishing something brand new. But I've seen, in my opinion, there's it warrants requiring a little bit more of an extensive setback. And that's kind of where I've come up with that number. But if Township Council, I guess, requested that I make that adjustment, but you can make that request of me to bring back with the final bylaws. But my suggestion would be to go a little bit beyond what's typically permitted. Would be my suggestion.
Okay, and the 5 meter zone that you've suggested, what do you anticipate to be in that 5 meter zone?
Through the chair, that's a good question. I guess in my mind, I wasn't entirely imagining that it would be landscaping, but I think at a minimum, I'm imagining some privacy fencing and some fairly substantial landscaping. It could be we could require the full 5 meters to be landscaping, or it could be a setback, landscaping, and fencing as well within that 5 meters. There's flexibility.
Okay. Okay. The next question I've got is Councilor Gorda touched on the site plan control, and Neil also mentioned the site plan control applied only to a mat construction or mat manufacturing facility. Is that the case here? In other words, if Mr. Gallo sells his property to somebody else, all these setbacks and requirements have to be reconsidered with a new use or whatever the case may be?
Through the chair, in a nutshell, that is correct. This site-specific bylaw that I've prepared is very specific to this use that exists to date, because ultimately we're trying to address a legal issue that the township's facing with the applicant. So it is very specific to this use. So if someone else purchased this property and they weren't carrying on this business where all these zone provisions are being specifically applied to, they would have to either comply with the bylaw and or bring forward an application to establish a new use. So one thing about this proposal is that, this site would be very appealing to a contractor's yard. But that's not a permitted use as of right within the agricultural zone. So anyone that wanted to maybe purchase this property, start up another use such as a contractor's yard would have to come back to Township Council and seek approval for that proposal.
Okay, thank you.
Megan, I have a question for you. So the equipment and stuff that's stored on the southern boundary, if it's stored within anywhere on the property, then he would have to create this large berm with trees and all this other stuff. Or if he moves the items to the center of the property, does he still have to create this large buffer, like this berm?
Through the chair, so it doesn't have to be a berm, but regardless of where the storage is located, the provision of the bylaw says that it has to be screened. And what I'm saying is, in addition to that screening requirement, that there also be a setback be applied as well. So he would have to meet a setback plus the screening.
Okay, and so your first thoughts of screening are a berm, but it could be something else.
To you, Mr. Mayor, a berm would be, I think I would say that the bylaw says you could consider a berm. But I'm not specifically saying that. I am saying that this development requires a berm. It says shall be screened by opaque fencing, masonry wall, landscaping, or a berm to the satisfaction of the township. So there's flexibility in that zoning provision. It doesn't have to be a berm. But I think what I'm envisioning is a combination of landscaping and fencing.
Okay. Okay, Councillor Bailey.
Yeah, I guess sorry, thanks Megan for coming and for your report. Thinking about that setback, I was also sort of focused on the 2 to 10 range and thinking, well, maybe we could just tap into the minimum and without moving all the equipment, perhaps he could plant a whole bunch of spruce trees or something like that. But you were thinking more of a permanent structure for a screen, is that correct?
Through the chair, Councilor Bailey, I'm imagining, it could be spruce trees plus a fence. I'm imagining a combination. But ultimately, I would provide advice to the township, but it would be up to the township to ultimately determine what type of screening it would be, because that wording is very specific. Another thing that I don't think I've mentioned that, I could, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think as part of the site plan control process, if there's an application that, and I'm trying to think of the right wording, if that perhaps council, in terms of an application meeting a site plan, that if council would like to see the site plan and approve the site plan directly, as opposed to having staff delegate the staff with the approval authority, that could be something that could be explored. So typically staff would just approve the site plan application and the plans. But if council would want, that site plan could be brought back here for council's direct approval. But Courtney and Glenn, correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so we would have input. Just to piggyback onto Councillor Goyda's site plan question, maybe to Glenn, is there enough information through this whole process where the site plan application could be filled out? Do we have all the details that we need already to proceed with the site plan application?
We would have to take a look for sure to confirm that, but I would think that yes, we would have the vast majority of the information already.
Okay, so the application itself shouldn't be too cumbersome.
I don't think it would be, no.
Okay, and just because I'm new, what are we talking in terms of cost for the applicant to apply for a site plan control?
I don't know those offhand. Maybe Megan or Courtney, you could fill in.
Yes, I can fill in. We have two fees for site plan control. So we have a standard and a minor fee, and how those criteria are determined is based on the scope of the project and the necessary studies required. So a standard plan is around $20,000 and a minor is around just under $12,000. And again, that would be determined based on the scope of the project.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, thanks.
Question. Actually, can I have Ms. Whitefox read the resolution as it please? I want to see what it says.
That the planning recommendation report and draft bylaw prepared by the County of Wellington Planning and Development Department be received, and that the final bylaw be brought back with any recommended changes at the next council meeting.
Well, I know Councillor Bulmer wanted that change in regards to the buffering or screening to be more in line with our current bylaws. Or the question for council, I'd like to see the report from staff on the implications of what I mentioned before. If we impose the 5-meter setback and then we accept a letter from the neighbor annually that they are not they're not a complainant because of the 5-meter setback, so that this individual can continue to operate as he is. And then if the use were ever to change or ownership ever changed, then the 5-meter setback would be implemented. I want to see the ramifications if we were to enter into or agree to something like that. And also, and I'll let the council talk about it once. And also, I'd like to know if there's an opportunity to put a holding provision on the property or something on title that if the use or title landowner changes, then site plan would have to be completed. Those are I'd like to see some reports on that to see if it's a possibility. You're talking 10. So now our job, or the job of the applicant, is to try to convince staff that this is a minor site plan process. So he has to pay $12,000, and then he has to build a berm with fences and cedar trees, and you're looking at $20,000 or $30,000 for somebody that's been operating. Yes, it's grown in size. I think I don't know Mr. Gallo. I've met him once in my life, so it's not like I'm advocating for my best friend or anything like that. But I just see a huge cost implication to existing use on an old aggregate pit with 5 neighbors that don't have any complaints. So I'm trying to get it in place and allow this individual to continue making a livelihood without spending another $30,000 or $50,000. So I'd like to see those two reports come back with the final bylaw. I'll open that up to council. Where are you, Councillor Bulmer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just before I get to your points, I just have a couple of, if I could ask Ms. Ferris a couple of follow-up questions about the setback as well. Is that okay?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
So just to clarify, you mentioned there were several spots in the bylaw where you talk, the existing zoning bylaw, where it could be 2, 5, or 15 meters. Could you just clarify what the two land uses would be beside each other for the 2 meter, the 5 meter, and the 15 meter? Where, in what circumstances, which one would apply?
Through the chair, sure, I can clarify that. So within the outdoor storage uses and areas section, it establishes a 2-meter setback to any lot line, and it doesn't have anything to do with an adjacent use. With regards to that, that section that talks about outdoor storage is not permitted in any yard abutting a residential zone. The abutting property isn't in a residential zone, it's still in an agricultural zone. So it technically wouldn't be applied, but it's something I was contemplating, that although it's not in, you know, a rural residential zone, it's still an agricultural zone that allows a dwelling. And that setback would be, sorry, that would be the 5 meters. And then in the scenario where, you know, it's an industrial zone adjacent to a residential zone, which this is not, the interior yard setback would then be 15 meters. Does that help kind of clarify the different scenarios? So then I can come back and reiterate that the way the bylaw is written now, 2 meters, the way the current zoning bylaw is written now, 2 meters is the minimum requirement from a lot line.
So the only thing I didn't hear in there is industrial. This is not industrial. We're doing site-specific agricultural, are we not?
Through the chair, that's correct, yes.
Okay, and the lot we're worried about is currently, there's no house on it, is that correct?
Through the chair, that is correct as well.
And if it's zoned agricultural, anybody purchasing that lot would have an opportunity to see the use and know the zoning, that they're buying a piece of property that's zoned agricultural, which means they're knowingly buying a piece of property that is employment land. They're not buying property that is that gets the protection of a residential zone.
Well, through the chair, they will definitely be able to visibly see the operation from that lot, because it's pretty much, it's the same grade as one another.
You've helped enormously. You can't imagine how big a jump this has been in my mind to understand that what we were applying was the setback between a residential zone and an industrial zone. And this is, I think, a common issue, that people buy a property in the countryside. It's still zoned agricultural. The property next door is still zoned agricultural. They're buying it with they should have the understanding that they don't get the protection of a residential area. So I must admit, understanding the policy framework we're working in here, I'm now more comfortable with a 2-meter zone or 2-meter setback, understanding that it's an agricultural next to a site-specific agricultural. That seems, and if we want to enhance it, we could ask for enhanced screening there. But I think I'm beginning to feel it might be unfair to Mr. Gallo to subject him to a setback that is not consistent with what would be required in the zoning bylaw.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. That's a valid point. It's essentially restricting Mr. Gallo for somebody that hasn't built a house on an agricultural property. So those are great perspectives.
Would you like to speak to your points now?
Sure, please.
One simple word answer: no.
Thanks. I shouldn't let you speak. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. We'll go around the table more. Matthew brought up some valid points that they are both agricultural and agricultural site specific. Let's talk about Councillor Ballmer's recommendation going to a 2-meter setback, and we can have that come back in the final draft of the bylaw. So Councillor Goida.
In terms of the 2-meter setback versus the 5-meter setback, as long as there's some kind of screening there, whether it's cedar trees or something to give it some protection, I'm okay with it being 2 meters. And if that would provide some kind of help to Mr. Gallo to not have to move all that equipment, especially being a vacant land beside it, I'd be okay with that. Did you want me to speak to your other point as well about the site plan?
I'm sure it's going to go over like a lead balloon. Go ahead.
I just think, and I have to be careful what I say, but to be blunt, I think that by allowing not for this for this to not have site plan control, what we're essentially saying is you can, you know, you can start a business without the proper permission and ask for forgiveness later, and you might not have to pay the things you would have otherwise had to have paid if you had gone through the correct process to begin with. And I don't mean that to sound, you know, crass in any way, but I think I really, you know, I stand by. We have to be consistent and we have to apply the same standards and guidelines to everybody throughout the township.
Councillor Spillis.
Yes, with respect to the 2 versus 5 meters, that was the gist of my questions of Megan. As far as I'm concerned, 2 meters is satisfactory given the conditions there. And the fact that this property is specific, the zoning is specific to the specific use, to me makes it all the reason why I'm happy with the 2 meters. And the fact that anybody else buying the property is going to have to come back and redo the site plan approval process. With respect to site plan approval process, I have a question of our CAO. This property has had several building permits previously, and I would assume as part of the building permit process, there would have been some site plans required. Is that not correct?
Could very well be, but I can't comment on the file because I don't know what was applied for in the past or what the nature of that material was, but it could very well be, yes.
Okay, so my comment on the site plan approval process, I agree with Councilor Goyder, we have to go through that process, but I think there's a way of waiving this $12,000 fee. Like the $12,000 fee is basically for a greenfield. Here we have something that's existing. I believe it's got several building permits associated with it already, so it has gone through some site plan review issues previously, and I would suggest that staff look at and report back on looking at a reduction to the 12,000 fee commensurate with the available information they have.
Mr. Chair, could I pipe in?
Sure.
For a second? Sorry, it might not be appropriate to do so, so let me know if that's the case.
That's fine.
Well, I can ask you that question then. How's that sound?
Hey.
Thank you. So through the chair, maybe I would just mention with regards to the building permit. So I just wanted to clarify this one item. So I did speak to the chief building official, and my understanding is that the permits sought for this property were specifically for a dwelling and accessory to a residential use. It was never intended to be permits for an industrial operation. So single-family dwellings and single-family dwelling accessory uses are exempt from site plan control. So I just wanted to clarify that. In terms of exemption from fees, and maybe this is probably more of a staff comment, but I don't know, what's the township's process from exempting from fees? Does someone have to make a delegation to township council to ask to be exempt once the fees are paid, or could we loop it in all with this process? It's maybe just a clarification question for me.
We'll let staff report back to council on that one, because I don't even know the breakdown of the fees. There might be county fees involved, and then we got to go to the planning committee meeting and ask them to waive their fees. It gets complicated, but I think Councillor Spillis asked for staff to report back on the possibilities. We'll leave it there.
I wish to point out that this is already existing. It's not a greenfield, and to me that is a difference of what you have right now, which is primarily geared to greenfield site plan applications.
Okay, Councillor Bailey.
Sorry, my dogs are barking. Just be brief. I'm fine with the 2 meter. I'm fine with that. And yeah, if we can try to find some creative way to maybe reduce fees for the site plan application, I think that would be a good route to go down.
Okay, so do we have the resolution amended to have staff report back on the 2-meter setback and to look into the costing of the minor site, or what they call it, standard site plan application fees? Ms.
Yes.
Whitefong?
That the planning recommendation report and draft bylaw prepared by the County of Wellington Planning and Development Department be received, and that the final bylaw be brought back with the recommended changes regarding the required setback being 2 meters instead of 5 meters at the next council meeting, and that staff investigate and report back on the possibility of reduced site plan control fees.
Councillor Ballmer, did you not have a concern about the wording for the buffering as well? Make sure that's amended as well.
Well, I trust that Ms. Ferris is captured those, and whether it's appropriate to change or not, I just want to make sure she's aware of my concerns.
All right, can I get a mover for that, please? Councillor Spula, seconded by Councillor Ballmer.
Okay,
All in favor, Councillor Ballmer,
in favor.
Councillor Goida,
In favor.
Councillor Spoulos,
In favor?
Councillor Bailey.
In favor?
I'm in favor. That's carried. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to go back to our 6.17. My pages are all messed up here. The consent agenda.
Wish me to speak, Mr. Mayor?
Pardon me?
Wish me to speak on 6.17?
Yes, please.
Okay, I was wondering if staff can give a quick overview on the implications of these changes and what are we doing to reflect what we can to adopt the best of these changes.
So I can just give a quick overview. So now that the regulations have been proclaimed as it relates to Bill 197, the township has 2 years from September 18th to update its development charges bylaw, its parkland dedication bylaw, and to determine if community benefits charges would be applicable in a high density development area within the township. Fortunately, the province is still allowing municipalities to continue to utilize the parkland dedication rates that we currently charge in accordance with Section 42 of the Planning Act. There is more legislative requirements as part of this now, and so our bylaw will likely need to be reviewed. And municipalities no longer have to choose between Section 42 of the Planning Act and the community benefits charge regime. So the legislation is very specific as to in what circumstances community benefits charges can be imposed. And so community benefits charges are not imposed with respect to development of fewer than 10 residential units or with fewer than 5 stories. And as part of the regulations that were recently proclaimed, the prescribed percentage is 4% of land value at the time of building permit issuance. And the CBC is available to assist in recovering the growth-related costs of high-density developments that are not recoverable through development charges. So just a quick overview on how this is applicable to the township. So we will be required to amend our development charges bylaw to take advantage of the increased funding available with the removal of the 10% deduction for soft services. So soft services are things like parks and recreation. So we recently passed a DC bylaw in July 2019, and Watson and Associates assisted with that. We'll also have to pass an updated parkland dedication bylaw in accordance with the changes in the Planning Act. We passed this in 2018 with the assistance of the County of Wellington's Planning Department. And we'll also need to determine if community benefits charges are applicable within a high density development area within the township. So fortunately, we've budgeted for this work as part of our 2020 budget, and staff are hopeful that we'll address the requirements related to these new regulations as part of all of this work. So.
Great, Mary. Thank you very much. Good work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. All right, can we get a resolution to receive that? Does any other member of council, sorry, have any questions for Mary? Just speak up if you do. No? Okay, excellent. Okay, Ms. White Fox, that resolution, please.
That the consent agenda item 6.17, Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing letter, parkland dedication, development charges, and community benefits charges authority be received for information.
Okay, can I get a mover for that? Councillor Goida, seconded by Councillor Spoulos. All in favor? Councillor Balmer,
In favor.
Councillor Goida,
In favor.
Councillor Spoulos,
In favor?
Councillor Bailey.
In favor?
I'm in favor. That's carried. All right. Next up is public meetings on October 21st, 2020. Public meeting held by electronic participation at 7 p.m. These are for a housekeeping amendment to zoning bylaw 023/18. These are township initiated housekeeping amendments that affect all lands in the township of Puslinch unless otherwise specified. That's it. And then we have reports. I see none for Puslinch Fire. Maybe the CAO would like to mention the wonderful donation we received to Puslinch Fire since our chief is absent. Or I could do it.
Sure, you could do it if you like.
All right, well, I found out on Puslinch today that through Enbridge and that Puslinch Fire received, I don't know, it was 200 or 250. See, Glenn, I'm gonna mess this up. It's either combination units, so carbon monoxide smoke detectors. And when I'm at work, we get calls to residences, middle of the night, their carbon monoxide detector is going off. And most times it's just a faulty detector. And, you know, you never want to leave somebody unprotected. So the fire trucks carry, you know, we call them spares. And I believe that's the intent of these, this large donation is if Puslinch Fire Service members respond to a household where people have a concern for carbon monoxide, they find that either they don't have any or that they're malfunctioning, that they can provide them some protection for the remainder of the night until they can, you know, resource some replacements that are permanent. So I thought that was a great program. It, you know, that helps our constituents. Does that cover it for the most part, Glenn?
Yep, that's it.
Perfect.
Mr. Mayor?
Councillor Swills, go ahead.
Yes, I was wondering if a letter of gratitude has not been sent, could it be sent to Enbridge?
I think
We'll
that
make
would
sure of
be
that,
one-
yes.
Yeah, that'd be great. Excellent. Anybody else? Okay, Finance Department, I see none. All right, Administrative Department, we have report ADM 2020-037. Who wants to speak to that? Mr. Schwendinger or Ms. White?
Sure. I'll speak
Go
to
ahead.
that, yeah. So basically what this is doing then is just extending the current process that we have set up for our council meetings to the end of the year. This is consistent with what a lot of our neighbors are doing, and I understand some who have gone back to in-person meetings have gone back to the virtual just because of the way things are in the province. And the ability to meet with the separations in place, we simply don't have that in current council chambers or the technology to do it remotely anywhere else. So it's working well now, so let's just continue now and hopefully things will be better early in the new year.
Can I ask a question on that report? Of course I
Sure.
can. Is there any possibility we could put the public information meetings to the afternoon as well and just give the option to go to 7 p.m. or, I mean, I guess the last one we had, we barely finished the council meeting, then we went right into the PIM. But I just see having staff have to work in the evening. If we're going to afternoon virtual, could we do it for PIMs or would you prefer to stay at 7?
It seems to be working quite well now in this way. It does give a bit of a gap in between for a bit of a break, and if the council meeting does go longer. And at this point, still the public is still used to coming to the information meetings in the evening, right? That's what was previously scheduled. I think the intent of council before was to try and let's keep things as close as we can to the previously established schedule. So for right now, it seems to be working, but we could keep an eye on that if we have to change things again.
Okay. Any questions from council on that? Councillor Balmer?
Nope.
Okay. Councillor Goida, where'd you go?
I
Oh,
just
you're
have
over here.
one. I just have one quick question. I know this applies to regular council meetings, but what if our budget meetings are often scheduled for 9 a.m. So will that remain the same, or is the intent for those to move to 2 o'clock as well?
The intent would be to keep those budget ones at the 9 o'clock where they were before, because those intend to take a bit of time.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Sepoulos.
I'm good, thank you.
All right, and Councillor Bailey.
No, I'm good.
Excellent. So we have a resolution for that.
That report ADM 2020-037 regarding amended 2020 council meeting schedule be received, and that the Township of Portland Council approve the amended 2020 council meeting schedule.
Okay, can I get a mover for that, please?
Sure. I'll move it.
Councillor Sepoulos, seconded by Councillor Ballmer.
Yes,
In favor, Councillor Ballmer?
yes,
All right, Councillor Goida,
In favor.
Councillor Sepoulos,
In favor.
Councillor Bailey.
In favor.
All right, I'm in favor. That's carried. Now, I believe we're on to correspondence. Association of Municipalities of Ontario. We have a resolution for that. Does anybody have any questions or comments on that one? Councillor Goida,
Nope.
sorry, skipped Ballmer, Councillor Ballmer.
nope,
Everybody's moving on my screen. Okay, Councillor Spillis.
No questions.
Okay, Councillor Bailey. Nothing?
Nope,
It'll
I'm
be,
good.
I think we're gonna see that the money that we receive is gonna be less because gas has been pretty cheap and that I believe they're relative, right? So we'll see what, how much we get. Anyways, can I get Ms. Whitefox to read that resolution, please?
That item 10.1, Association of Municipalities Ontario, the Federal Gas Tax Fund in 2019 report be received for information.
All right, can I get a mover for that, please?
I will.
Councillor Goida, seconder, Councillor Bailey, I saw your hand. All in favor, Councillor Ballmer,
in favor,
Councillor Goida,
In favor.
Councillor Spillis,
In favor.
Councillor Bailey,
In favor.
and I'm in favor. That's carried. All right. Now, the aggregate resource property valuation advocacy report. Anybody have any questions or comments on that one? Councillor Ballmer?
no,
Good. Councillor Spillis?
No questions.
Okay. Councillor Bailey?
No questions.
All right. Can we get that resolution read, please, Ms. Whitefox?
Sir, Mayor, you missed Councillor Goida.
She's on a pecuniary on this one,
You're right.
Mr. Councillor Spillis. I actually
You're
remember.
on top of
Usually
it.
I don't. All right. Can I
That
read that
item 10.2, aggregate resource property valuation and advocacy report be received for information.
All right, can I get a mover for that, please? Councillor Spillis, seconded by Councillor Bailey. All in favor, Councillor Ballmer?
in favor,
All right, Councillor Spillis,
In favor.
Councillor Bailey,
In favor.
and I'm in favor. That's carried. All right. On to mayor's updates. What's going on? I'm still working with, you know, we're trying to plan a Santa Claus parade, and also I've been dealing with the Optimist Club on Remembrance Day. They're obviously going to look very different this year. And so I believe the Optimists are having a meeting this afternoon or tonight to discuss any options if they have any. So hopefully, I don't know, maybe hopefully we can do something, whether it's virtual or, you know, very lightly attended at outside at you know, the PCC. Paving is almost completed in Aberfoyle, which is nice. Well, they didn't do the roundabouts, they just did in between the roundabouts. That's almost completed. And don't really have much other than that. Anything from council members? Any updates? Any reports? No? Okay.
Quiet.
Oh, it's a quiet week, month. Am I missing anything, Mr. Schwendinger? I think it's been
Nope.
pretty quiet.
All good.
All right. Okay. All right, get a resolution for that, please.
That council received the mayor's updates for information.
Thank you. Can I get a mover for that, please?
Sure.
Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Spillis. All in favor, Councillor Ballmer.
in favor,
All right, Councillor Goida,
In favor.
Councillor Spillis,
In favor.
and Councillor Bailey.
In favor.
All right, that's carried. Bylaws, we have none. And I believe we are going to recess unless, is Tom available? Ms. Whitefox?
Kevin.
Kevin, sorry, I thought it was Tom Holinski. No, Kevin Thompson.
Kevin
Sorry.
Thompson just let me know that he'd be available shortly. He was thinking
Okay.
around 3:45, so we should be close.
All right, is it appropriate to go into closed and wait for him since it's such close timing?
Might as well just take a recess for 10 minutes and reconvene and then go into closed.
Sounds good. We're on recess. That'll be good timing for the kids. We'll see everybody.
You want to go at 4 o'clock or you want to take 10 minutes? What do you want to do?
I'd like to go at 4 o'clock. The bus arrives at 3:52-ish, so that would give me an opportunity to see my kids. How about you, Councillor Bailey? Does that work for you, 4 o'clock? Everybody work 4? 4? Yeah, we're gonna do 4. We'll reconvene at 4 o'clock.
I think we're missing Sarah still.
Oh, we are.
Oh, yeah. Her chair's there.
All right, whenever you're ready, Miss White Fox.
That council shall go into closed session under section 239 of the Municipal Act for the purpose of 13.1, adoption and receipt of the minutes of the previous closed meeting, being September 16th, 2020 closed meeting. And item 13.2, confidential verbal report from Kevin Thompson, Smith Villariat Law Firm regarding litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, LPAT Appeal PL 200037.
Can I get a mover for that, please? Councillor Spillis, seconder.
Sure.
Councillor Goida, all in favor. Councillor Ballmer.
In favor.
Councillor Goida.
In favor.
Councillor Spillis.
In favor.
Councillor Bailey.
In favor?
And I'm in favor. That's carried. Now we're in closed.
That council moves into open session at 5:09 p.m.
Get a mover for that, please. Councillor
So moved.
Spillis, seconded by Councillor Ballmer. All in favor. Councillor Ballmer.
In favor.
Councillor Goida.
In favor.
Councillor Spillis.
In favor.
Councillor Bailey.
In favor?
And I'm in favor. That's carried. And the next one, Ms. White Fox.
That council receives the adoption and receipt of the minutes of the previous closed meeting, being September 16th, 2020 closed meeting, and the confidential verbal report from Kevin Thompson, Smith Villariat Law Firm LLP regarding litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, LPAT Appeal PL 200037, and that staff proceed as directed.
Thank you. Mover for that, please.
Sure.
Councillor Spillis, seconder. Councillor Goida, all in favor. Councillor Ballmer.
Favor.
Councillor Goida.
In favor.
Councillor Spillis.
In favor.
Councillor Bailey.
In favor?
I'm in favor. That's carried. Next, we have the notice of motion from Councillor Spillis. It's on the agenda. Do we need to have it read, Mr. Schwendinger, or can it just be there for everyone's enjoyment?
Just noted there, that's sufficient.
10-4. All right. Next is new business. Any new business from anyone? See none. Any announcements? Any announcements? No. All right, Ms. Whitebox, our confirmatory bylaw.
That the following bylaw be taken as read 3 times and finally passed in open council. Bylaw 2020-047 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council for the corporation of the Township of Puslinch at its meeting held on the 7th day of October 2020.
Perfect. I'm going to move for that, please. Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Goida. All in favor. Councillor Ballmer.
Favor.
Councillor Goida.
In favor.
Councillor Spillis.
In favor.
Councillor Bailey.
In favor?
I'm in favor. That's carried. Excellent. And adjournment, please. You can call the time.
Sorry. The council hereby adjourns at 5:11 p.m.
Mover, please.
I'll move.
Councillor Ballmer, seconder.
I'll second.
Thanks, Councillor Spillis. All in favor. Councillor Ballmer.
In favor.
Councillor Goida.
In favor.
Councillor Spillis.
In favor.
Councillor Bailey.
In favor?
I'm in favor. Thank you for your time, everyone. I truly appreciate it.
Thanks for a
Thank
good
you.
meeting, Chief.